Welcome to our first Q&A video. Over the last few weeks, you asked questions, and today I will try my best to answer them. But before we start, I have a few other things I would like to share. First of all, a thing that was bugging me for a while is the actual size of Methania. As some of you mentioned, a planet has to reach a certain size to keep hydrogen over a long time, which could be quite complicated with a planet that is smaller than Earth. So after some calculations, I've come to the conclusion that Methania would need to be roughly 40% bigger than Earth, which would allow it to retain hydrogen over geological time. This will also be supported by a biological hydrogen cycle. And while this size would increase the gravitational pull, it would still allow creatures of Methania to reach a bigger size than we currently see in Terragusters. And the second thing that I'd like to share is that Methania now has a page on the fandom wiki. It's still a bit rough and incomplete, and I honestly don't fully understand how to make some parts of it, so contributions from anyone interested would be greatly appreciated. Okay, let's get to answering the questions. Why did you pick methane as your main focus? I choose methane as my main focus because I've seen a lot of projects that stick to the usual oxygen-based chemistry, and I think exploring methane allows for a fresh perspective on world building. Methane is simple, yet very different from CO2. Plus, it's well studied in biological context, especially regarding how certain microbes produce and consume it. Will we get an episode based around the full aquatic lifeforms of Methania? It seems like a lot of you are interested in aquatic life on Methania. I'm glad to say that the episode dedicated to fully aquatic life is already planned, and it might be the episode after the desert one, which I'm already working on. Are you planning to have some sort of mass extinction event? Of course, what would be a good Spec Evo project without an extinction event? What software do you use to make all lifeforms for the project? Because it looks much different than any other model for any other similar project I've seen. For Methania, I mainly use Worm3D. It's a free, user-friendly, browser-based 3D modeling software designed to make 3D art accessible to everyone. Its unique look comes from the fact that it's based on organic blending rather than solid modeling, allowing it to create organic shapes and easily blend textures, making it the best software for the creation of fluid and natural designs. I will leave the link to it in the description in case you want to try it. Will there be an episode focusing on species within a lineage? This is something I would really like to do after the extinction event. I don't think there is really a reason to diversify lineages too much if they won't affect the ecosystem in any meaningful way and will disappear after the extinction event. How long do you plan for this series to be? Do you see it hitting episode 50 in a couple years? So far, my plan is to make around 8 new episodes, but certainly not 50. After we are finished with Methania, I could start a new project, discovering other unique worlds. I would like to ask you a question about what inspires you when you create your project, such as books, works, games, etc. What type of world building inspires you? Are you a fan of any work such as Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, Darwin 4, etc.? I think projects that inspire me the most are the works of Alex Reese, especially Bearded World. I also like to get my inspiration from video games. I really like Subnautica for its beautiful and alive ecosystems, and when it comes to alternative biochemistry, my main inspiration was Oxygen Not Included, with its creatures that have unique metabolisms, allowing players to practically replace many industrial buildings. Another game that made me more interested in biological pathways is Thrive, a free, open-source game where you can evolve yourself into being an animal, plant, sulfur-digesting bacteria, and more. They also have some amazing loading screens. Was there already some problems associated with the production or some difficulties with deciding what path you should take for evolution of your biosphere that would dramatically and irreversibly affect the future of the project? I don't think there were any real problems with production other than being sick and not being able to record. When it comes to decisions about evolution paths, I'd probably say that Column went through the most changes. Unlike other species, where changes were minor, like hoofs in ambulators and larval stages in Aerogusters, Column was initially planned as a small, pig-sized wood-eating creature. So by changing it into more aquatic form, we can now have more complex marine environments. When will the continents break apart? Like during episode 6 or 8? Continental break is something I'm planning to talk about in future. So maybe not in episode 6 or 8, but it's planned. I will also talk about it shortly in the next episode. Will you ever do an episode solely on infections, parasites on Methania? I was thinking about making one, and I think it can be an interesting thing to talk about. For now though, the focus of the series will be mostly on organisms that might become hosts in future. Will bipedal animals evolve? In this series, I will try to cover as many body plans as possible. So, if there will be any chance to make a bipedal organism, I will make sure to use it. If the tholins could feed a bountiful cloud of bacteria, would this aeroplankton be a sufficient amount of nutrients for filter-feeding animals on land? Will there be any organisms beyond the troposphere similar to sky whales? I like that idea a lot, but there are some nuances. The concentration of plankton in haze layers would be much smaller compared to concentration in oceans. So even if some creatures evolve to feed on these microorganisms, they likely won't reach the size and complexity of a whale. Will Methania have a sentient species? Sentience on Methania is something I've planned for the longest, and there is a big reason for it. As you know, Methania has no oxygen, so no combustion and no fire, which would make their technological progress much different from that of humanity. So to give future Methanians a chance to reach any meaningful progress beyond the Stone Age, a lot of right decisions should be made. So while I can't certainly say what species of fonts will be, or when they will evolve, I already have a rough idea of what technology they might use. As seen on the map, there's two subpolar regions on the opposite parts of the continent. It could have been interesting to see how they would diverge from each other, considering that they might use different strategies, and completely different species might adapt to similar environments. Will that get covered in the next episode? This is a good idea, and maybe it will be covered in future. As far as I'm concerned, this region won't be important for the series, so for now, let's just assume that convergent evolution took the lead, and species on the opposite subpolar regions develop similar ways to adapt to the cold environment. Can we see at least one descendant of branchiopropulsors? Yes, but we probably won't talk about them until the aquatic episode. I believe the oceans in this world aren't made of water. If so, could hydrothermal vents form, and could they harbor unique organisms, just like their hydrothermal vents on Earth? Oceans on Methania are indeed made of water, and Methania is geologically active, so the process of formation of hydrothermal vents could be very similar to those we can see on Earth. When it comes to unique organisms, I was working a lot on creating a sulfur cycle version of Methania, which would allow me to create a unique sulfur-based ecosystem. Are there any oxygen-producing or eating microbes on Methania? Are they useful for some clades? Every organism on Methania uses oxygen found in other compounds in some way. The simplest example would be the usage of glucose to gain energy or produce other building blocks such as cellulose. When it comes to direct interactions with atmospheric oxygen that are very rare and limited, it is usually used to oxidize methane to CO2, and then it is metabolized by methanogens with the help of hydrogen. Does life on Methania use a different type of glucose from Earth? Surprisingly, life on Methania does use the form of glucose that can be digested by organisms on Earth. There are 16 stereoisomers of glucose, and it isn't unlikely that in our universe there is a world with glucose similar to ours. How toxic is oxygen to Methanians? Methanians evolved in an ecosystem without any atmospheric oxygen, so you wouldn't really expect any protective mechanisms in their body, leaving them very vulnerable even when exposed to small amounts. What's a lightning storm like on Methania? Lightning storms on Methania shouldn't differ much from that of Earth, because both will form through the charge separation in convective clouds. Effects, on the other hand, would differ. On Earth, lightning is usually associated with starting fires, by introducing energy needed to start wood combustion. On Methania, without oxygen, no fire can start. This energy instead could lead to the separation of methane molecules and production of simple tholins such as those that were produced during Miller-Urey experiment. What did you originally want the objects to be named before you landed on their current names? Honestly, looking back, I don't think I spent much time coming up with names for objects, which becomes pretty obvious once you realize that a planet with methane in the atmosphere is called Methania and its moon with sulfurous rocks is called Sulfid. Creativity. In the case of Estrus and Olor, however, their names derive from the Greek god of dusk and stars Estrus and Norse god of winter Olor. I don't exactly recall why Celestian was named this way, but I do remember that Ino was a name that is inspired by Io, the moon of Jupiter. Will you ever be addressing Sulfine's orbital eccentricity? Yes, but not in the near future. Will you ever mention the other planets from the episode 1 in the future? For sure, but not in near future. Let's focus on Methania alone for now. Do you have any plans for content other than Spec Evo? I had some ideas to start another side project about a more realistic look at magic, but for now there will be more focus on Methania. Do not a column taste like salmon? Yes or no? No. If you went on a business dinner with a pentacrab, and he stands up, leaving the first two legs above the ground, in a gesture meaning he wants to shake hands, which of the pair would you shake, without knowing what is the one he used to walk? This question fascinated the minds of philosophers for decades, who pondered which limb a pentacrab might extend in courtesy. Its walking legs are ill-suited for such refined exchange, so the true handshake will be made with the supple tentacles near its mouth. In this way, the gesture becomes not one of a burdened locomotion, but of a delicate social grace. Thank you for watching. See you next time.